Good evening, opera friends and family. I'm Nancy King, the Artistic Director of Opera Wilmington, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our special event, Divas at the Latimer House. This program features three Opera Wilmington favorite singers, Jennifer Wiggins, Constance Paolantonio, and Jemeesa Yarborough, whom you will see next summer in our production of The Magic Flute. Today we're celebrating three historic 19th century divas. In addition, we'll hear from Jessie LaBelle, who is going to give us a brief presentation on musical entertainment in the Victorian home. I'd like to take this moment to say a special note of thanks to Jessie at the Latimer House, and also to Patrick Ogilvie, our videographer, and our wonderful artists, and most importantly, to our exceptional collaborative pianist, Elizabeth Lobreach. Jenny Lind, dubbed the Swedish Nightingale, was one of the foremost celebrity singers of the 19th century. She was greatly admired by the leading composers of her day, including Meyerbeer, Schumann, Berlioz, Mendelssohn, and Verdi, several of whom were inspired to write opera rolls and other music expressly for her voice. Audiences, too, thrilled to her celestial purity of tone and brilliant high register. She had great success performing in opera in her native Sweden, Germany, Austria, and Britain, but retired from the operatic stage in 1849 after performing in Meyerbeer's Robert le Diable for Queen Victoria. She then embarked on a dazzling concert career, including an 1850-52 tour of the United States that sparked Lind mania among the American public. Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield is recognized by historians as the first African-American concert singer. A former slave, she made her public performance debut in 1851, at a time when most Americans thought of black music as highly stereotyped comic songs of blackface minstrelsy. Her nickname, the Black Swan, was not only consistent with the trend of naming female singers after birds, and a way of comparing her to her contemporary Jenny Lind, the Swedish Nightingale, but also emphasized her exotic rarity as a black woman singing repertoire previously thought to be reserved for white performers. Matilda Ciceretta Jones was one of the most famous women of her generation and the highest paid African-American entertainer of her day. Admired for the purity, richness, and power of her voice, as well as her musicality, technique, and ability to command the audience's rapt attention, she toured the United States, Canada, Europe, and the West Indies as a soloist, and also sang as a soloist under composer Antonin Dvorak during his time in New York. She achieved widespread stardom after a performance at Madison Square Garden in 1892, and in 1893 became the first African-American woman to headline a concert on the main stage of Carnegie Hall. She was nicknamed the Black Patty, meant to compare her favorably to the celebrity Italian opera singer Adelina Patti, though she preferred to be known as Madame Jones. Still, the Black Patty nickname was a powerful marketing tool. In 1896, Jones formed the Black Patty Troubadours, a musical variety company of singers, comedians, jugglers, and acrobats, and she toured with them for almost 2 decades. We think of Johann Sebastian Bach as a pillar of the Western classical canon. But he was not really thought of as a great composer until his rediscovery in the 19th century. This Bach revival was led by composer Felix Mendelssohn, with whom Jenny Lind had a close friendship. She was his muse. He tailored the soprano soloist part in his oratorio Elijah for her voice, and also started an opera for her, Lorelei, left unfinished at his early death in 1847. Lynn's husband, the composer, conductor, pianist Otto Goldschmidt, also promoted the music of Bach, establishing the Bach Choir in London. Lind trained the soprano section and performed as a soprano soloist when the choir gave the first English performance of Bach's B minor Mass in 1876. Please enjoy Connie Paolantonio performing for you now Et Exultavit by J.S. Bach.
Exultavit Spiritus meus. Et exultavit Spiritus meus. Et exultavit Spiritus meus. Et exultavit Spiritus meus in Deo salutari, salutari meo, in Deo salutari meo. Et exultavit Spiritus meus in Deo salutari, salutari meo, in Deo salutari, in Deo salutari meo, in Deo salutari meo.
Among the 19th century composers who also found inspiration in Bach, thanks to Mendelssohn's advocacy, was the French composer Charles Gounod, best known today for his operas Faust and Romeo et Juliette. Gounod improvised a melody over Bach's Prelude No. 1 from the Well-Tempered Clavier. His father-in-law transcribed this, and the text of the Ave Maria Latin prayer was added later. The Bach-Gounod Ave Maria was a staple in Ciceretta Jones's concert programs, added to her repertoire during the second tour of the West Indies and South America in 1890. This piece allowed her to display her particular vocal qualities that audiences adored. In the words of one critic, the entrancing sweetness and smoothness of her tones, her distinct enunciation, and the ease and naturalness with which she handled her voice astonished and captivated. We hope you'll be captivated by Jemeesa Yarborough now singing for you Ave Maria by Bach-Gounod.
Gloria
Even though Jenny Lind was a virtuoso coloratura soprano, capable of great technical agility, her repertoire included simple works that allowed her to communicate with her audiences in a more direct, expressive mode. One of her signature recital pieces was this late 18th century canzonetta by Haydn. Originally titled simply A Pastoral Song, Haydn's setting of a sentimental English poem by Anne Hunter is simple and pleasing, with a lilting melody, strophic form, making it a favorite parlor song of 19th century amateur sopranos. For Jenny Lind, this song fit perfectly with her sweet, demure stage persona. Here's Constance Paolantonio singing My Mother Bids Me Bind My Hair.
My mother bids me bind my hair with bands of rosy hue, tie up my sleeves with ribbons rare, and lace my bodice blue. Tie up my sleeves with ribbons rare, and lace my body's blue. For why, she cries, sit still and weep, while others dance and play? Alas, I scarce can go or creep, while love is away. Alas, I scarce can go or creep, while love is away. While love is away, is away, is away. 'Tis sad to think the days are gone when those we love are near. I sit upon this mossy stone and sigh when none can hear. I sit upon this mossy stone and sigh when none can hear. And while I spin my flaxen thread and sing my simple lay, the village seems asleep or dead. Now love is away. The village seems asleep or dead. Now love is away. Now love is away, is away, is away.
Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield's repertoire included sentimental songs as well as Scottish and Irish ballads. One of these was The Last Rose of Summer, a setting of a poem by the Irish poet Thomas Moore to a traditional tune first published in 1813. Greenfield's connection to the British Isles was more significant than just her repertoire selections. In 1853, following a 2-year tour of the northern United States and northeastern Canada, she sailed to England. There, the American abolitionist Harriet Beecher Stowe, author of the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, introduced Greenfield to various British dignitaries, including Queen Victoria. Greenfield's performances in England were enthusiastically reviewed, and she partnered with Stowe to inspire and cultivate a transatlantic movement for the abolition of slavery. Here's Jennifer Wiggins with the Britain arrangement of The Last Rose of Summer. Ciceretta Jones made her professional debut in the spring of 1888 in a series of concerts sponsored by the Bergen Star Company. One of these concerts in Philadelphia was reviewed positively. Her voice is sweet, sympathetic, and clear, and her enunciation a positive charm. Her programs included major operatic and operetta arias, as well as art songs, popular parlor tunes, and English ballads. As was typical, many of these songs featured idyllic pastoral imagery of flowers and birds, with bird-like virtuosic effects to show off the singer's superhuman vocal abilities. Thomas Arne's song, When Daisies Pied, sets words from Shakespeare's Love's Labor Lost and imitates cuckoo calls in the voice and piano. Here's Jemeesa Yarborough to sing for you When Daisies Pied.
When daisies pied and violets blew and
Today, when we want to listen to music, we put on our Pandora app, download a Spotify playlist, or if we're old school, put a record on or put in a CD. 168 years ago, when the Latimer house was built, this technology did not exist. Prior to the 19th century, musical entertainment was reserved and predominated by the wealthy and the elite. Most could not afford to spend time or money on music, musical education, or musical instruments. It wasn't until the mid-19th century when a burgeoning middle class began to have a more expendable income that music truly became accessible to the masses. Parlor music was very popular during the mid-19th century and would have been enjoyed in the settings that you see here today, with traditional folk tunes and popular operatic arias transcribed for home performance. The piano, which was invented around the turn of the 18th century, had by the mid-19th century become widely popular in the homes of middle and upper class families. A symbol of social status, the home piano was played predominantly by women as entertainment for the family and for visiting guests. What we know of today as popular American music saw its beginnings with early blackface minstrel shows and the appropriation of African American music. By the mid-19th century, an entire sub-industry had developed around the performance and dissemination of music showcased in these minstrel shows, with new songs and sheet music being produced on a mass scale. By the late 19th century, most American popular music was produced in Tin Pan Alley in New York City, with sheet music for voice and piano printed and purchased on an industrial scale. Much of the music produced at the close of the century was oriented to songs that amateur singers or small-town bands could perform. In an era without television or radio, a song's popularity was often aided by word of mouth, heard at a friend or a family's house, or performed by song pluggers. Song pluggers were pianists and singers working for the music publishing companies or located at your local music store, who performed musical demonstrations of the latest music so you could hear it before you bought it. Simultaneously, the technology of musical home entertainment was growing. Thomas Edison, of light bulb fame, was also the developer of the phonographic cylinder, of which was the first practical recording device. Think of it as a vinyl record, but instead of flat, this technology was hollow and cylindrical, and they were called records for their ability to record sound. They were also mostly made of wax, and the sound recording was etched on the outside of the cylinder. By the turn of the century, millions of phonograph cylinders were sold internationally. At the same time, flat record discs were patented by Emil Berliner in the late 1880s, along with his gramophone player, which was the earliest iteration of what we today call the record player. From intimate parlor performances to the mass production of music technology, the second half of the 19th century saw the foundations of musical entertainment as we know it today. So the next time you open an app or put on a CD, remember the origins of popular music and the technology we use to listen to it.
Jenny Lind enjoyed great success in bel canto opera roles, especially Amina in Bellini's La Sonnambula, Marie in Donizetti's La Fille de Régiment, and the title role in Bellini's Norma. Even after she retired from the operatic stage in 1849, bel canto arias by Rossini, Bellini, and Donizetti were central to her concert programs. An important element of historical performance practice in the bel canto repertoire is ornamentation, when the singer improvises and adds notes over the written melody. And Lind was especially praised for the agility of her cadenzas and her taste in ornaments. In this famous Act I aria, Rosina expresses her determination to marry Lindoro, a poor student who's really the Count, who just serenaded her a little while ago. We invite you to listen to the vocal pyrotechnics of Connie Paolantonio singing Una voce poco fa from The Barber of Seville by Rossini.
Una voce poco fa qui nel cor mi risuonò. Il mio cor ferito è già, e l'indoro fu che il piagò. Sì, l'indoro mio sana, lo giurai, la vincerò. Sì, l'indoro mio sana, lo giurai, la vincerò. Il tutto ricuserò, e l'ingegno guzzerò, alla pizza chiederò, e contenta io resterò. Sì, l'indoro mio sana, lo giurai, la vincerò. Sì, l'indoro mio sana, lo giurai, la vincerò. Io sono dolce, sono rispettosa, sono ubbidiente, dolce amorosa, mi lascio reggere, mi fo guidar, Ma se mi toccano dove mio debole, sarò una vipera, sarò, e 100 trappole prima di genere, farò giocar, e 100 trappole prima di genere. Farò giocar, e 100 trappole prima di genere. E 100 trappole farò giocar. Io sono dolce, sono obbediente, mi lascio reggere, mi fo guidar. Ma se mi toccano dove mio debole, sarò una vipera, sarò, e 100 trappole prima di genere, farò giocare, e 100 trappole prima di genere. Farò giocare, e 100 trappole prima di genere. E 100 trappole farò giocare, e 100 trappole farò giocare, e 100 trappole farò giocare,
Comparisons between Jenny Lind and Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield in the 19th century press were common, especially because they shared a similar repertoire, which included bel canto arias by Rossini, Bellini, and Donizetti. While on her 1851-53 tour, Greenfield's concert programs featured Italian arias that allowed her ample opportunities to add virtuosic ornaments and cadenzas. Though we don't know if O mio Fernando was ever part of Greenfield's repertoire, we do know that an aria like this would have been well suited to her famously wide vocal range, in particular her commanding low register. The newspaper critic who reviewed her debut performance in Buffalo, New York, described her singing notes in alto with brilliancy and sweetness, and descending to the bass notes with a power and a volume perfectly astonishing. In this aria, Leonora has learned that the king has granted permission for her to marry Ferrando. Unfortunately, Ferrando doesn't know that she is the king's mistress. Knowing the shame Leonora will bring on Ferrando when he learns of it, she decides to confess everything to her betrothed. Here's Jennifer Wiggins singing O mio Fernando by Donizetti. In April 1884, Ciceretta Jones gave birth to a girl, Mabel Adelina, quite possibly named after Adelina Patti. In June of that same year, Claude Debussy's cantata L'Enfant Prodigue premiered in Paris as his entry in the Prix de Rome competition, which he won. Although the air de Lia from L'Enfant Prodigue was not part of Ciceretta Jones's repertoire, we have included it here because it speaks to her own personal tragedy. In 1886, Mabel died, not yet 2 years old. That devastating loss may have spurred Ciceretta to pursue her singing career. Later that year, she moved to Boston to study voice with faculty at either the New England Conservatory or the Boston Conservatory. The historical record isn't clear which. Based on the biblical parable of the prodigal son, in this aria, Leah laments the absence of her prodigal son, Azael, who became an outcast after leaving home to pursue worldly pleasures. Ciceretta Jones knew that same maternal love and heartbreak for a lost child. Moreover, Debussy's emotional, dramatic writing would have been perfect for her talents as a performer. Critics acclaimed her voice of combined strength and sweetness, her great declamatory power, and her stage presence that kept the audience spellbound. We know you'll be spellbound by Jemeesa Yarborough performing Air de Lia from L'Enfant Prodigue by Debussy.
Mon cœur maternel, ton lit
In 1850, Jenny Lind traveled to America at the invitation of showman P.T. Barnum and performed a tour of 93 concerts under his management. Their relationship is fictionalized with a lot of artistic license in the recent musical film The Greatest Showman, starring Hugh Jackman as Barnum. Opera fans may have cringed when watching the scene in which Jenny Lind belts out a power ballad, but songwriters Ben Pasek and Justin Paul's pop style reminds us that in the 19th century, opera was pop music. Amateur musicians bought sheet music of Jenny Lind's most celebrated songs and arias to perform at home, much like we might ourselves have done with hit Broadway show tunes or pop songs of Bette Midler, Barbra Streisand, and Bernadette Peters. For our final selection in today's program, here is Connie Paolantonio performing Never Enough from The Greatest Showman.
I'm trying to hold my breath. Let it stay this way. Can't let this moment end. You set off a dream in me, getting louder now. Can you hear it echoing? Take my hand. Will you share this with me? 'Cause darling, without you, all the shine of 1,000 spotlights, all the stars that we steal from the night sky will never be enough, never be enough. Towers of gold are still too little. These hands could hold the world, but it'll never be enough, never be enough for me. Never, 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 never enough for me, for me. Never enough, never enough, never enough for me, for me, for me. All the shine of 1,000 spotlights, all the stars that we steal from the night sky will never be enough, never be enough. Towers of gold are still too little. These hands could hold the world, but it'll never be enough, never be enough for me. Never, 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 never for me, for me. Never enough, never, never, never enough, never, never, never enough for me, for me, for me, for me.
We hope you've enjoyed today's program and will visit our websites at Opera Wilmington and the Latimer House, and consider following us on social media.